Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jackaria and I'm a year 13 student studying biology, chemistry, maths and psychology. In this video, I just want to talk about how I managed to get grade 9s in all three of my sciences at GCSE. As usual, timestamps will be in the video description so you can jump around and find exactly what you're looking for. Now, I did triple science all with the edXL specification, but the advice I'm going to give you in this video will apply to any exam board you're doing, whether it's AQA, OCR, etc. So don't worry about that. Now, for context, each of my science papers were out of 200 marks, and I got 181 marks for chemistry, 176 for biology, and 174 for physics. I'm going to put on the screen right now the grade boundaries for the sciences during the year that I did my GCSEs, which was 2019. And you should be able to see that I was quite comfortably able to get within the grade 9 boundary, and I hope that gives you a lot more confidence in what I'm about to say and you can take my advice with a lot more reassurance. Now, in terms of additional resources, there were two main online resources that I actually used for my science GCSEs, and they were Physics and Maths Tutor and Free Science Lessons, which is a YouTube channel. Physics and Maths Tutor was perfect because it had a bunch of exam style questions that were split up into topics so that you could easily navigate and find any questions you were looking for based on what topic you were studying. Now, this resource is so good that I still use it for my A levels today, so I definitely recommend having a look at it. Before any unit test I had, I would literally go on Physics and Maths Tutor and just go through all the questions that were available for my spec on that specific topic. And that way, come the exam day, whether it was the unit exam or my actual GCSEs, I had a better understanding on the type of question that the exam board can ask, but also how they actually mark the question. So I knew exactly what pieces of detail to include that would get me the mark rather than just adding all this unnecessary information. After doing a lot of questions, you realize that there are only so many questions that the exam board can actually ask you about. And so when you go in for your actual exam, the questions feel a lot less unfamiliar, and suddenly you feel a lot more confident when you're answering because the questions you see in front of you seem very familiar to questions that you've answered many times before. Now, I do want to put an emphasis on the fact that this resource will only really be effective if you can properly mark your answers and take time to really reflect on where you lost marks and how you can improve for the next time you do those type of questions. It's always important to see where you've lost the marks so that you can go back through your revision and reconsolidate those areas, and that way you'll have fewer gaps in your knowledge. Now, about Free Science Lesson. Now, this is a YouTube channel which explains a lot of the concepts in GCSE biology, chemistry and physics in very short 3 to 5 minute videos. They're honestly so easy to digest, and I feel like the way the content is explained is really to the point, so you can save a lot of time going through longer videos that end up going off topic or adding unnecessary information. They're also really good for when you just want to really quickly recap a chapter but you don't want to go through the effort of opening up your textbook, and so this makes revision a lot more quick and a lot more efficient. And honestly, these videos were probably one of the biggest factors in helping me understand the content of GCSE science, which I think is really the most important thing when it comes to revising content. Now, I've mentioned this in a video I've done previously, which was my video on how I use Excel and Anki to help revise all my A-level content, and that's the idea that memorization will never be as important as understanding the concept. It becomes really difficult to memorize large amounts of content if you have no understanding of it and all the information is meaningless. And so this channel is honestly perfect in helping you find that understanding so that the memorization aspect of the learning becomes a lot more straightforward. Now, just a quick bonus resource that I didn't really use, but I have a few friends who did end up using it and did end up getting grade 9s in some of their sciences as well, and that's Seneca Learning. The website works by giving you a rundown of any topic that you're going through and then follows it up by giving you short and brief questions on the content you've covered, just to make sure that you're actively taking it all in and staying alert and focused while you're reading through the content. This wasn't something that I really enjoyed using, but it's definitely worth checking out if it sounds like something that will help you. It's completely free, and if it helps you, then it's definitely worth giving it a go. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is something that I stumbled across that not only helped me structure all my revision, but make sure I was being as efficient as possible with the information I was taking in by making sure that I wasn't learning anything that I had to, whilst prioritizing the information that was actually relevant for my exam. And that's the exam board specification. Now, every exam board has one of these specifications, and they're very easy to access with a quick Google search. Usually, all you have to do is search the subject you're studying, followed by the qualification level, and then the exam board you're doing. For example, if I want to find the specification for GCSE physics, then I would have to search out physics GCSE edXL specification, which was the spec that I had to use. You can use this for any spec like OCR and AQA, and they're completely free to access and available for anyone to find online. Now, this is essentially a document that outlines all the different things that the exam board can question you on. Anything that's in the spec can come up in your exam, and anything that's not in the spec can't actually come up in your exam. Typically, in your textbook, you might find success criteria at the start of every chapter or sub-chapter, and usually these success criteria are directly copy and pasted from the specification as a way of showing students what part of the course that chapter is going to cover. In fact, the textbooks I had were really good in that they would reference the different number codes that would relate to a point in my specification, which made it even easier for me to see what content I was covering and what part of that information on that page was actually important for my actual exam. Now, how you use the specification is up to you. You can use the spec as a revision checklist, going through each of the points and ticking it off as you go, which is something that I definitely did. But I also used the specification to make active recall flashcards, which takes me on to my next point. Now, active recall was a concept that I'd only stumbled across about 2 to 3 months before my actual GCSE exam. I'd of course been doing a lot of exam questions and testing myself quite frequently, but the concept of active recall was something that wasn't that familiar to me. I actually stumbled across the idea when I was watching a video by Ali Abdal, and it completely changed the way that I approach my studies even today when I'm studying for my A-levels. By this point, I'd completely given up on taking any notes, which is something that I'd wasted so much time doing at the start of year 10 and even through year 11, and it's probably one of my biggest regrets. I realized that all these pretty notes that I'd made weren't really going to help me, and so I decided to ditch all of that and switch to making active recall cards using Excel. Now, this was actually something I'd also seen Ali Abdal do, but the video he made on it was more so about how he used it for med school, whereas here I'm just going to briefly talk about how I used it for GCSE. Now, if you want a more detailed video on it, then let me know and I'll try and make another video going as in detail into this whole Excel active recall method as possible. But for now, I'll just briefly go over how I used it for my GCSEs and how I think it really helped me secure those grade 9s. So, to summarize, essentially I would use the specification points and turn them into active recall flashcards on Excel. Now for this example, I'll use the GCSE edXL physics specification. So if you look here, you can see that on 2.1 it says, explain that a scalar quantity has magnitude, size, but no specific direction. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into an active recall flashcard using Excel. Now, obviously Excel is split up into different cells. So the first column here will be my question and the second column here will be my answer. In this instance, the question may be, what is a scalar quantity? To which the answer would be, a scalar quantity is a quantity that has a magnitude, size, but no specific direction. And that's one flashcard done. Here you can see that it's literally taken no effort and I've copied it word for word from the exam specification so that I can ensure that I get the marks in the actual exam. Now, I do this for multiple spec points and I'd sometimes use the textbook to add in any relevant information. And then after all of that, I would actually go through the cards, and the way it would work is I'd simply change the font color of the answer column to white so that I couldn't see the answer, and then just sequentially go through all my cards. After attempting to answer the questions, I would change the color of the question box to either green, amber or red based on how easy I actually found the specific question. essentially using a traffic light system to help me see where my weaker points were. Now, by the end of all this, I had a large number of flashcards, all based on the official specification published by the exam board, and that way I had confidence that my notes were actually relevant to my official exams. Now, after doing this, it became really clear to me which areas of the subject I had to do more work on, based on which areas or topics had more amber or red, and it meant that I didn't have to waste my time going through the topics that were majority green, which meant I'd understand them. And this was quite eye-opening because in a lot of cases there were topics that I felt really confident in, but I'd get a lot of red and amber, and the opposite too. There'd be topics that I didn't feel too confident in, but looking at my flashcards, I could see that I'd actually been getting the majority of the questions right, which meant I didn't actually have to go through it. So yeah, I'd literally go through the spreadsheet from time to time and focus on my amber or red areas, either doing the Excel questions or maybe taking it further and doing some exam style questions using physics and maths tutor based on that topic as well. And this would be something that I'd continuously do until the majority of my cards were green, which was the case coming closer to my exam, where I had a lot fewer reds and ambers and the most of the spreadsheet was basically green. And funny story, actually, one of the 6 markers in my official GCSE exam paper was actually based on an equation that only came up once in the entire spec point. Now, this threw a lot of people off, but because all my flashcards were literally based on the spec, I'd actually gone through that equation multiple times before, and so that was basically a very quick and easy 6 marks that I knew that I'd confidently gotten. And so yeah, that just goes to show that the exam boards can literally ask about anything on the spec. So the more clued up you are on it, the more easier it will be when it comes to the actual exam. Now, I just want to quickly talk about mock results, and primarily the fact that they don't actually define you. It's natural to have a few poor mock exam results. That's part of the process. But what's important is how you bounce back from it and what you do in response to the mock exam results you've gotten. And just for reference, apart from chemistry, none of my other sciences or my subjects in general really predicted me a grade 9, with most of my subjects borderline being either a grade 7 or 8. Now, I ended up getting grade 9s in all my subjects, so I think that just goes to show that predicted grades aren't that representative, and a mock exam can't really accurately say what grade you're going to get in your final actual exam. Whether you do really bad in a mock or whether you do absolutely amazing in it, what's important is you can't let that change your mindset of needing to work. Some people don't do too well in their mocks and they feel down and feel like everything they're doing is wrong and a waste of time, whereas other people do really well and then end up getting too complacent, and come the next mock exam they don't do as well because they've lost that mindset of revising and working hard. After you've taken in the mark you got, you need to start asking yourself the important questions to help you really understand how you can improve for the next mock, regardless of how well or how bad you did. It's really important to go through the paper, see where you lost marks, and ask yourself how you lost the mark. Was it a simple maths calculation error? Did you not include enough points in the question? So if it was a 5 marker, did you only include 4 points? Or was it just that you did not understand the content or you didn't revise it hard enough, and so you need to really go back through your textbook or through your flashcards or whatever method you're using to revise and reconsolidate that content so that you understand it better? You have to make use of your mocks to really tailor your revision, and I can't emphasize this enough. Mocks are literally the perfect way to emulate an exam environment and let you get an understanding of how you might have done if your GCSEs were to happen right at that moment. Now, once you've had some time to really reflect on that, make sure to put as much energy as you can on focusing on the areas that you're weakest in. There's no point in you spending a few hours going through a topic that you've gotten full marks in the exam and neglecting the topic that you couldn't get any marks in or you couldn't get enough marks in. The analogy I always like to use is when you're sitting down to, for example, revise for English, you don't waste time recapping your entire alphabet, but instead you get straight into the content and into memorizing anything you need to, whether it be quotes or inferences or analysis. So the reason you do that is because there's no point in recapping your alphabet because it's something you already know. So make sure to have that similar mindset when it comes to revision, where you shouldn't be wasting your time on content that's already very strong to you and that you're already very confident in. Obviously, don't completely neglect those topics, but the frequency in which you visit them doesn't have to be too high. And even if it's just once or twice every fortnight or every month, that will probably be sufficient if it's a topic you're really good at. This was something I felt I did really well, and I definitely say it played a very big role in making sure that I was strong in all the topics of the course and not just overly focused on one area that I either enjoyed or was specifically good at. Now, this definitely makes the exam seem a lot less stressful and a lot less daunting. Now, I just want to quickly finish off this video with some extra advice that I think is really important for GCSE students. Now, the first thing I want to say is don't assume the marks that you get. When I came out of my physics exam, I felt I did terrible. Versus when I came out of my biology exam, I felt a lot more confident in how I performed. But when I look back at the marks I got from my actual GCSE, I see that there were only 2 marks apart, which means I didn't really do too badly in either papers. Yet the mindset I had coming out of it were completely different. You can never really be sure how well you did. It could be that you felt you did really well, but the marks you got didn't actually reflect how you felt. And the reason I say this is you might walk out of an exam thinking you did bad on paper 1, but you should never let that affect your score or your performance for paper 2. And you should go into every exam with a fresh mind, completely ignoring how you felt about a previous exam either that day or that week. Secondly, make sure you get enough sleep before your exam. On the night of your exam, the last thing you want to do is stay up and just cram as much content as you can and then wake up feeling really tired and groggy on the day of your exam. If you do that, you're just going to wake up really mentally drained, and the small bit of information you manage to cram in is just going to negatively affect the rest of the content that you've worked so hard to revise, and I really don't think it's going to do you much good, especially if you're doing it for a mock exam, because that means come any future mock exams, because you've crammed in that information, it's less likely to be committed to your long-term memory. And lastly, make sure you have a good breakfast before your actual exams. And even on the days you have any big mock exams that you're preparing for, you've been preparing for, you want to eliminate as many sources of stress as you can come exam day, because it's going to be stressful regardless of how prepared you are. And the last thing you want to worry about is you being hungry or you being especially tired from lack of sleep from the night before. And with that, I have reached the end of the video, so if you found it useful, you enjoyed it, then leave a like, do subscribe, and let me know if there's anything you want to see in the future in terms of videos, or if there's any questions you have about this video in particular. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.